morning, good afternoon, good evening. One of the problems we have in Zimbabwe is that we have got an incredibly incompetent opposition. And their incompetence is dragging the nation deeper and deeper into the abyss. You advise them. Bodies like SADC have advised them, do not do A, B, C, D. They go ahead and do it. And when things go wrong, they do not even have the courage to admit that they were wrong. They even have the cheek to blame the very people who advised them. In this case here, SADC. Zimbabwe has had disputed elections. In fact, rigged elections since 1980, disputed elections for the last 24 years. While there have been many opportunities, notably during the GNU, to implement the democratic reforms and end the case of rigged elections, these have been wasted, and by none other than the MDC and CCC. And after wasting every opportunity, they've continued to complain that SADC is letting them down. In a latest video that's circulating in the social media, Nelson Chamisa is saying SADC condemned Zimbabwe's 2023 elections, and therefore then should not condone Zanu PF. SADC was absolutely right to condemn the 2023 elections. They were flawed. They were illegal. SADC's own report of those elections made it clear that the process was flawed. And so we're right to condemn it. And in this case here, Chamisa is right. It's only pointing a fact, in fact, to say SADC condemned the electoral process. And if it was coming from anybody else saying SADC should not condone Zanu PF, many people would listen. But coming from him, one has to despair. Let's just listen to the video and then discuss it.
No government can justly claim authority to govern unless it is based on the will and consent of the citizens and the people. On that score, none must be allowed to come through to office through the back door, through the window, or coercive means or command antics and tactics, as we have seen in Zimbabwe. Our regional and international institutions are guarantors and custodians of the integrity of institutions, but also integrity of processes, and cannot condemn a process that they have condemned. SADC condemned the process, the AU condemned the process, and therefore condoning it is clearly untenable. And of course, we don't expect them to ultimately endorse a sham and a fraud. No government can justly claim authority to govern unless it is based on the will and consent of the citizens and the people. On that score, none must be allowed to come through to office through the back door, through the window, or coercive means or command antics and tactics, as we have seen in Zimbabwe.
We'll stop it there. This argument we can have it endlessly. But I think SADC must be excused. SADC did play a vital role in forcing Zanu PF to sign the 2008 Global Political Agreement that gave birth to the GNU. The primary purpose of the GNU of 2008 to 2013 was to implement the democratic reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. And the task of implementing the reforms was left to MDC, then led by Morgan Tsvangirai. And Chamisa was a senior member of that MDC. The 5 years of the GNU were the golden opportunity to implement the reforms. And yet not even one token reform was implemented. At the end of it, SADC leaders are on record telling MDC leaders, do not participate in these flawed elections without first implementing the reforms. The advice was ignored. They went ahead and participated. And of course, soon after the results were out, they were complaining that Zanu PF had rigged the elections. The very thing that they were told Zanu PF will do. They had 5 years to implement reforms. They failed to implement one. They were told, do not participate in these flawed elections without reforms. They went ahead and participated. Indeed, they have been participating in flawed elections ever since the GNU debacle, all out of greed. So it is really annoying that again and again, Chamisa should now turn around and blame SADC for failing to stop Zanu PF implementing the reforms. We really can't afford this level of almost nauseating stupidity. We have got to accept our own responsibility. We can't pretend that the process, or we didn't know that the process was flawed when we knew. Chamisa himself knew that the 2023 election would be rigged. Just as he'd known that the 2018 elections were flawed and would be rigged. And he still participated, just like the rest of his friends did. Why? Out of greed. This is exactly what David Coulthard was talking about in the quotation I'm showing you on the screen there. In his book, he wrote, the 2013 electoral process was so flawed, so illegal, that the only logical step was to withdraw, which would have compelled SADC to hold Zanu PF to account. But such was the distrust between MDCT and MDCN that neither could withdraw for fear the other would participate and win all the seats. In other words, they participated in the flawed elections out of greed. And ever since, they've been participating in these flawed elections out of greed. Chamisa himself was adamant, was hell-bent on participating in 2023 elections. But he was even willing to falsify that he had plugged all the vote-rigging loopholes. Zanu PF was not going to rig the 2023 elections because it plugged all the vote-rigging loopholes. When he knew that he had not done any such thing. So why did he do it? Great. His colleagues who had participated, including David Coltart, Fazai Mahere, and many others who had participated in the elections 2023 and had won those few gravy train seats Zanu PF gives away as bait. They went on to take them even after SADC had said this election process was flawed. The very thing he's talking about here. And yet they still went ahead and took up their seats. Indeed, they even argued that they'd won those seats in liberated zones. Triple C had participated in all the contested parliamentary constituencies right across the country. So now they want to cherry pick and say those seats were in the constituencies where they had won, the elections were free, fair, and credible. Where they had lost, the elections were rigged. No one can ever accept that kind of stupidity. By participating in taking up the seats, Chamisa and company endorsed 2023 elections. The very thing he's saying SADC must not do. Why then did he do it? He wanted his friends who had won the seats, he wanted them to be endorsed as legal, legitimate. But Zanu PF to be called illegitimate, and is asking SADC to do that. We can't. This is totally meaningless. Zimbabweans had the opportunity to stop this madness. Chamisa and company had the opportunity to stop this madness of rigged elections. They did not. All they've been doing is complaining to SADC. They create the mess and they want to blame SADC. This is the kind of nonsense that is not helpful at all. There's talk that Chamisa and some of his supporters are planning to hold a demonstration, a protest during the upcoming SADC summit in August. What is it they are protesting? One has to ask. And if what Chamisa is saying here is anything to go by, they want to protest that SADC should not condone Zanu PF because they condemned the electoral process. But MDC and Chamisa himself is the one who gave Zanu PF legitimacy. When they had the opportunity to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections, they did nothing. They failed to implement even one token reform. This is the childish behavior that we've got to put up with, of somebody who thinks they can have their cake and eat it too. What do you want SADC to do? Does he seriously expect SADC would say, okay, Mnangagwa, you're not legitimate. Let's have fresh elections. Fresh elections now, nearly a year after the last elections. And the fresh elections with whom? Chamisa's own party, CCC, has imploded. He himself has abandoned the party in despair, claiming that Zanu PF has infiltrated it. So even if SADC could deny Zanu PF legitimacy, to what end and purpose? To allow Chamisa with no party to contest fresh elections? To allow the imploded CCC to contest the fresh elections? We can't keep on making a lot of noise where you ask yourself, what is the purpose? What are you trying to achieve? This is becoming a routine that is annoying to everybody. It's becoming the norm. We really cannot afford to waste a lot of time on chasing. This is a red herring. There is absolutely no plan, no purpose, no rational reason for Chamisa's claim. As much as SADC would have wanted to deny Zanu PF legitimacy, in the circumstances, SADC had no choice. The main opposition parties in Zimbabwe participated in the flawed elections, knowing fully well that they were flawed out of greed. What is more, they managed to con millions of their own supporters to participate in the flawed elections. So if millions of Zimbabweans themselves participated in the flawed elections, why are we blaming SADC for something that we have done ourselves? We shot ourselves in the foot and we blame SADC for it. We really need to get up, to grow up. We really cannot afford this carry on. We should be looking at how are we going to get reforms implemented before the 2028 elections, instead of wasting time making a lot of noises, asking SADC to do what everyone can see. What exactly do you want them to do? He himself doesn't know. You should not condone Zanu PF. As much as SADC would have wanted to deny Mnangagwa legitimacy, they cannot do that anymore. This is water under the bridge. And if anything at all, it's MDC, CCC, and Chamisa himself's fault that this has happened. And they should grow up and take responsibility for this. And stop wasting time on meaningless, pointless pursuits. This idea that SADC should not condone Zanu PF it has no purpose. To what end and purpose? None. What would that accomplish? Nothing. So why are we pursuing it? This idea that somehow we will correct the 2023 elections. Why did you participate when you knew that they were flawed? Greed. Why did you fail to implement reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections? Greed. Your greed, not SADC's greed. Have you corrected your own greed? The answer is no. If anything at all, Chamisa's greatest hope is that SADC will deny Mnangagwa legitimacy and appoint him president of Zimbabwe. Reward him for his incompetence, for failing to implement even one token reform in 24 years, and for participating in flawed elections, pretending that he had blocked all the vote rigging loopholes when he knew he had not done any such thing. He didn't even deploy election agencies at all the polling stations, even though he had been given the money to do so, pocketed the money. I think what annoys me is the number of Zimbabweans who are so naive, ignorant, and gullible that they keep swallowing Chamisa's nonsensical arguments and allow the nation to be dragged from one pointless situation to another. How anyone can allow this madness to continue beggars belief. Nations often get the government they deserve. And to be quite honest, in the case of Zimbabwe, we cannot deny that the nation has the government it deserves. We have done nothing to deserve anything other than this corrupt and incompetent Zanu PF regime, complete with its MDC, CCC, partner. The truth is, MDC was elected in 1999 on the understanding that the party would implement the democratic reforms which will help end the Zanu PF dictatorship. They have not implemented even one token reform. None in 24 years. This is a quotation that has been sent, and as you can read there, he who rejects change is the architect of decay. The only human institution which rejects progress is the cemetery. Quotation from Harold Wilson. And underneath it was a comment from a Zimbabwean who was circulating the comment. And the comment was, let's support change in our country by giving true, total support to our youthful, wise leader, advocate Nelson Chamisa. How anyone can still be so shallow, thick, and slow, beggars belief. The truth of the matter is, Nelson Chamisa has failed to implement even one token reform in 24 years, including the 5 during the GNU. He is the one who dragged the nation into flawed elections in 2018, and then last year, 2023. And so to keep calling him wise, beggars belief. You've learned absolutely nothing. And those who do not learn from history are destined to repeat the same mistake over and over again. I can understand my uncle or my aunt, my nephew in the rural backwaters of Zimbabwe not understanding what's going on here. But it's another matter. To all those Zimbabweans, many of them highly qualified, some of them with university degrees, professionals in their own right, who still refuse to accept that Zimbabwe is a failed state. And all because we failed to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. We had identified how to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. We needed somebody to implement democratic reforms. MDC, Triple C were elected on the understanding, on the ticket that they will implement the democratic reforms. How anyone can still, 24 years later, fail to see that MDC leaders have failed to carry out that task. Beggars belief. What do you think the opposition were elected for? When Chamisa claimed that he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes, was he lying? Was he telling the truth? If you can't see, even now, with the benefit of hindsight, that he was lying, what will it take to open your eyes? I think one of the sad things about Zimbabwe is that those who are or should be in a position to see why we are stuck are refusing to open their eyes. Unbelievable. How can anyone be so naive? Wise leader indeed. If Zimbabwe goes ahead with the 2023 elections without even one reform implemented, SADC, I believe, will probably rubber stamp those elections. It is not SADC's problem that we've disputed elections. It is our own problem. We have the opportunity to implement the reforms. We've refused to do so. We failed to do so even when you're given the opportunity to do so. We are wasting time on meaningless, absolutely, utterly wild goose chases, blaming SADC for something that we've done ourselves. Calling wise, corrupt and incompetent and utterly useless MDC leaders, Triple C leaders, wise leaders. Unbelievable. Well, Zimbabwe is not going to get out of this hellhole that we've found ourselves in until we open our eyes. Nobody's going to force us to open our eyes. We decide to close our eyes, then we will suffer. Welcome to hell. It's going to get even hotter. That is the truth. Zimbabwe can end this nightmare if we open our eyes. Thank you very much for listening, and have a good day.